This has been an interesting journey for us because how long ago was it that we first met at the
2010 Yacht Shop?
At 2010 at the Yakima Writers Conference. There is a mutual friend, a guy named Scott Morris, who's a good buddy of mine and a good writer, and he said, I want you to meet this guy named Eli Cranor. And he said, if you can't talk to this guy, he said it's like you not helping yourself. he said he's an ex-football player that very serious about becoming a writer. He said he's a guy of great talent and incredibly hard work. And he said, I really think you guys will become friends. And we have become friends. And I've been just delighted to see Eli just take off and work his butt off, and he take that same drive and work ethic from his football and take it to writing stories and becoming just a terrific novelist. And I think, when was Don't Know Tough? Was that 2 years ago or 3 years ago?
2022.
So in 2022, Eli, or I guess in 2021 before it came out, won a contest with Soho Press, which is a great publisher. It also publishes our friend Bill Boyle. And he submitted his novel for a debut novel contest and won. And it wasn't necessarily a secret to people who knew Eli. They knew it was just a matter of time before this was going to happen. And when this book came out, which is a story about football and all kinds of dark substances that happened in Arkansas, the book was, best list on the New York Times, USA Today. It won the Edgar Award for Best First Novel. I mean, just lit off like fire. And it's just wonderful to see Eli back in town. This is book number 3, and he's already, I hate this guy, I think he already has 3 more books already done. How many books do you have? You have like 5 more books already done.
Just one.
He's an incredibly hard worker. I've just enjoyed getting to know him over these last decade, and he is truly one of the great new voices in Southern noir, which is a dark art that I love to dabble in. So here, with no further introduction, Eli Cranor. Welcome back to
Yeah, so I think this talk actually needs to start back in 2010 at that yacht shop. And thanks so much for doing that, Ace. Because I played football, played high school football. I got a couple former Cyclones in the crowd right here with me. And so the guys I graduated with in Arkansas are here in Oxford. And anyway, I had just finished up playing college football. My dad, I was weird in that I had majored in English Lit, and then I was playing quarterback, for a small Ouachita Baptist in Arkansas. And anyway, my dad got me this for college to come to the yacht shop. And so I actually ended up staying with Ferris, who was one of my Cyclone, Russellville Cyclone buddies. And so I stayed there, and I don't know, I guess I was writing a lot then. Y'all might know Jack Butler, originally from Alligator, Mississippi. And he ended up in Arkansas and a bunch, but he was related by marriage for just a little bit of time to my greatest writing mentor, a guy named Johnny Wink. And so anyway, I was dabbling in it. I'd write short stories and all this stuff, and then my dad got me this to come to the yacht shop. And I came, and I stayed with Ferris, and really, that's where I met Ace, and that was, the first time, and maybe it's still the only time. We met Dante Stewart. Remember at the last Oxford conference for the book, we met another guy who had done football and also done writing. And anyway, that was just a huge moment. And this always, when I come back to Oxford, it feels so full circle for me, because when I was at Ouachita, I was watching, I told this story, I think, the last time I was here, but it's worth telling. I was trying to, this back in the days of DVDs and all that stuff, and I was trying to find the rough south of Larry Brown, because I was reading Larry Brown. And again, like a fireman or a football player, it just felt, And so I actually had Ferris again. He burned me a copy of The Rough South of Larry Brown and mailed it to me because I was a poor college football player at the time. So I don't know, this place, it always just feels like a second home. And it's a place that since 2010, I've always wanted to be around. And so this book came out July 2nd. And so I've been on the road since like the Sunday before then. And so what's that, a couple of weeks or more now? And so I don't know, I just wanted to do something a little different for you guys. So I'm actually going to play a little guitar. So if you'll bear with me, this is kind of for me where it all started. I was 10 years old. All my family, my mom and dad, are both from Forest City, Arkansas. So that's right across the river from Memphis, just about 30 minutes. And I was 10 years old. My grandfather passed away, and I went back there, and we were there for like a whole week. Kind of getting everything set up, getting all that stuff going. And he had this old guitar. I don't think he played, but I found an old guitar. It was Poppy. It was what I called it. And so anyway, I just started picking up the guitar, and I was like 10. And my dad had all these old cassettes that I'd grown up listening to and was still listening to. John Prine, Harry Chapin, Carole King's Tapestry, singer-songwriter stuff. And when I started playing guitar, about the time I could get like 3 chords down, I immediately started to try and write. And that's where like the whole writing thing started for me, was writing song lyrics and things like that. From there, throw Ferris in again. We had bands all the way from junior high. Ferris, our band was Cold Weather Bridge. I think it was.
That's right.
Yeah, Cold Weather Bridge was our band name for a while. It changed to like Kanowski, and I think the last one was DJ E and the MC Squares. So anyway, I don't know. Book talks can be awful boring sometimes, and so I just thought this song does have something to do with the book, and I will talk about the book eventually. But that sounds out of tune. But yeah, this is a Johnny Cash song, and I used it. So I wrote Broiler. What Ace was saying, I'm not quite as prolific as what it looks like because I couldn't get an agent for forever. And Don't Know Tough got rejected by about everybody in the world until Bill Boyle, speaking of another Oxford connection, put me on this Soho contest and said, well, you ain't got to have an agent, just send them the book. So I did, but in the meantime, I kept writing. So I had Ozark Dogs and I had Broiler already finished by the time or a draft of them already finished by the time Don't Know Tough was ever published. And so that's kind of been the secret. So I said all that to say, when I wrote Broiler, I hadn't had anything published. I didn't know how big of a pain in the booty it was to use real lyrics from songs. And so I had woven this whole Ring of Fire song all the way through this novel, Broiler. It just fit. And if you've read it or if you're familiar with it, it's got mariachi horns. It's got, this real kind of dark language about love and what love can be. And there was one line in particular. I fell for you like a child. Oh, but the fire went wild. And that ends up being an epigraph for the book. And it was a pain in the booty. But my publisher was like, Eli, can't we just allude to the song? Like, don't we just say like that song is playing and not use the actual lyrics? And I said no. And then they fought with the Carter Cash estate, because does anybody know who actually wrote The Ring of Fire?
Shel Silverstein?
No, June wrote it. June actually wrote it, which is kind of a great fit for Broiler as well. So we had to negotiate for about 6 months with them, and I finally had to write them a letter where I was like, I kind of played the Arkansas card. I was like, I'm a small town artist. Johnny Cash was an Arkansas boy. So can't we please use these lyrics? So anyway, I'm making the most out of us getting the lyrics.
Bound by wild desire, I fell into a ring of fire. I fell into a burning ring of fire. It went down, down, down. Flames went higher, and it burns, burns, burns. The ring of fire, the ring of fire. The taste of the sweet, hard like ours beat. I feel for you like a child. Oh, but the fire went wild. I fell into a burning ring of fire. I went down, down, down. Flames went higher. And it burns, burns, burns. The ring of fire. The ring of fire. I feel for you like a child. Oh, but the fire went wild. So I've often said, as I've ventured into this, being in a small town, Arkansas, and people get wind of you writing books, and some of them care and some of them don't. And I always say, my favorite thing to say is, being an author is the lowest level of rock star. So I enjoy. Thank y'all letting me play out my rock star dreams there. To talk about this book, I have found it is harder. It was easier. I don't know if it was easier, but it's one thing to write a book. It's another thing to talk about it. And so anyway, I've been talking about it. And the way I've been talking about it is I kind of take it from the outside in, which I think a lot of us do when you pick up a book. You start with the cover, which when they first sent me what they wanted for this cover, y'all, if I could have told you what, I'll tell you what it was. It was like this, it looked like a scene from like some idyllic Maine setting, like a farm in Maine. You know, it had like this silo, and it was this weird kind of, I think they thought it was a chicken house. But damn, it was just all wrong. I mean, it was just the wrongest thing you could possibly do. So anyway, we ended up on this feather, which I had a little bit of blood, right there in the middle. And then you got these things on the back, and I'm going to read a blurb, because these things are ridiculous to ask for. And if you don't know what a blurb is, as an author, you got to reach out to people and say, hey, I'm an author and I like you, and maybe if you'll read this and, write a blurb, it'll help me. And it's always strange, but as a guy I was born in Forest City, lived there till I was 4, and then moved to Russellville, Arkansas, which is really in the River Valley region of Arkansas. But the difference in geography and culture between the Delta and that region, and then as you go on up into the Ozarks of Arkansas, it's night and day. I mean, that Delta region of Arkansas has more in common with Mississippi than where I ended up growing up, So a guy when I started reading a bunch of that stuff in college, the guy was Daniel Woodrell, who wrote Winter's Bone. And so I just did like a cold email out to Daniel Woodrell and just said, hey man, I'm writing from Mark. Kind of pulled the same Johnny Cash thing. And he didn't make any promises, but he said, yeah, send me the book, and we'll see. And here's what he ended up sending back. And I'll tell you what else. He sent this back, and then he also sent about 300, 400 words worth of an email about these horror stories that he had heard about the Tyson family. And how the horrible thing that he wasn't telling me where the bodies were buried, but I think he was kind of warning me, about this, and it scared the hell out of me. But I was thankful for the blurb. And here's what he ended up saying. He said, I don't have the proper term for what Eli does with words, calm but no in prose, and nearly Steinbeckian concern for his characters. Their woes and petty victories, dreams and crappy jobs. There is conflict and tension and sorrow. but it's his people who stick. And I read that not to brag, really, but to also, it's the best way I have to talk about this book. It's these people who stick. So the breakdown of this book is, it's really, there's 4 main characters, and they almost kind of serve almost equal parts. I mean, really, they all 4 kind of serve it. So you get different point of views. You have Luke Jackson and Mimi Jackson. Luke is the manager at Detmer Food. No relation to Tyson at all. Luke is the manager at a Detmer Foods chicken processing plant in Springdale, Arkansas. His wife, Mimi, is a new mother. Their son is 6 months old. And then you have 2 line workers. You have Edwin Salcedo and Gabriela Menchaca. They're both working on the line. They're in a relationship. And I don't know, somebody told me this. I thought this was maybe the best way to put it. Raising Arizona, like this, they said this was a darker version of Raising Arizona, and I could see that. So it mixes all sorts of stuff up in there. And again, like I said, it's a hard book to talk about. So I'm just going to read, and I know reading is also kind of a weird thing, but I'm going to keep it really short. But here's what you get on, this is Luke. So this is Luke Jackson, the plant manager, and this is kind of his world, how he views the plant. What Luke enjoyed most about his plant, any plant really, was how it worked. Everything had a purpose. Everything followed the same schedule, which was exactly what Luke would tell the government inspectors as soon as they arrived. The schedule was simple. It went like this. After 45 days, broiler chickens are of proper weight and ready for harvest. They arrive at the plant in modular bins, specifically designed for maximum comfort and proper ventilation. From there, workers trained in humane handling carefully suspend the birds by their feet, strapping them into a moving line. Next, the chickens enter a dim-lit room where they are subdued with rub bars, which provide a relaxing sensation and encourage neck extension. Luke always made sure the inspectors noticed how the broilers closed their eyes when the bars touched their chests. The birds' necks are cut a few moments later. Then they're run through a scalding bath designed to loosen the feathers. And finally, the broilers are eviscerated, the part where a machine guts the chickens and cuts off their feet. Luke's plant processed 175 broiler chickens every minute, a rate not allowed in most states, not even some counties in Arkansas. And Luke was damn proud of that, especially when things ran on time. So that's Luke. And then I just wanted, as a follow-up, this is just the first paragraph of the book. And I think it's funny when you get Luke's point and then you follow with, this is his wife, Mimi Jackson. Despite all that Mimi Jackson knew, the chicken fajitas still looked good. Smelled good, too. She watched the dark-haired waiter balance 3 plates on one arm as he hustled past her table and the 5 other women she'd invited to La Huerta. They were wives of Detmer Foods plant managers. They played bunco and were members of local junior league chapters. And just recently, they had all performed a miracle. So that's the opening paragraph. Anybody want to guess what the miracle that Mimi and all the other plant managers' wives just performed? They're all new mothers. So that'll be a little bit of a spoiler as we get into that. But that is what this book is really about. It's about motherhood, and it's about the chicken processing industry. Yeah, I mean, I told you it's hard to talk about it. And so what everybody always asks me is, even without a book that's as strange as this one, they say, the main question they always ask is, where do you get your ideas? Where do you get your ideas? It's always the number one question. And I got to a point, as a good Arkansas boy, where I just say Walmart, kind of grin. But this one, I think it deserves explanation. So the chicken processing part, talking about Poppy, the same grandpa who I found that guitar that time. Pop we'd be driving, and if you've been around a chicken house, you know that smell. And we'd be driving in Arkansas, and I'd smell one. I'd be like, "Oh, Pop, what's that smell? That smells horrible." And he'd go, "No, it smells like money." You know, like that was what I knew of the chicken processing industry. Up until I taught in public schools around Arkansas for about 10 years. And toward the end of that career, I'd been a football coach, and I was always teaching English, but toward the end, I taught in an ALE school. So ALE is alternative education. If you ask these students, they would have told you that's where the bad kids go. That's what they would have said. It wasn't always true. They were there for all sorts of different reasons. But it was a smaller class size. I was brand new, and I walk in on my first day, and there's a table in the back, and I have two students who literally walked straight into class, put their heads down, and just were passed out asleep. And they did not wake up till lunch. And I would walk by and kind of nudge the table. I played guitar. I did everything I could do, to try and wake them up. And they were out until lunch. And so eventually when they did wake up, I started asking, "What's going on? Like, why are y'all sleeping? What's up?" And so they start telling me, "Well, we're working these night shifts at the local chicken processing plant." And so, again, I was writing then, but I wasn't published. I was still curious. One thing that's important to me that I've found is I like to write, Arkansas sort of stories. And this felt so Arkansas. I mean, I've lived in South Florida. I've lived in Sweden. People say, "Where are you from?" I say, "I'm from Arkansas." And they're like, "Arkansas?" First they ask, do we wear shoes? And then I said, "No." And then second they ask, "What's in Arkansas?" And I always say Walmart and Tyson. Those are two things that people know that I can point to. And so this felt like a story. So I start asking them all these questions, and they're telling me about how the shifts are 10 hours, maybe 12 hours, depending on how many chickens come in. And that means they might get off at 6:30 in the morning, or they might get off at 7:30. Some days they have time to take a shower, sometimes they don't. And they come to class because most of my students are seniors. So most of them were like just there for one more night. They needed that last 9 weeks or that last semester to get graduated. They start telling me about how cold it is, how it's 40 degrees to keep to keep bacteria from growing. So they wear multiple layers, plastic ponchos. Then I said, "What's up with the plastic ponchos?" And they're like, "Well, the blood and the guts and all that stuff." But also there's like this mist, this antibacterial mist. And so anyway, they tell me all that stuff, and this one guy, his job, he wore a metal mesh glove. So kind of like chainmail, and he would cut the left hind leg off of these broiler chickens for hours. And so as interested as I was in talking with them, I also felt like I write novels, I want to write novels. I didn't know what the story was, and it all felt so far. I've never worked on a chicken processing line. I didn't know my way into it, and where the other part comes, where the motherhood side of all this story comes, and it also it deals not only with motherhood and being a new parent, but it deals with miscarriage, which is a huge thing. And as you look up here at me, it was a strange thing, because what happened was I put this idea away, and then in between the birth of our first two kids, my wife and I grieved two miscarriages. And Mallory is my wife's name. She got to come along with me for like the first week when we were doing all the Arkansas stops. And I'd always get to this point in the talk, and what I was trying to do was I was trying to connect like how that experience for me made me come back and bring this whole thing into this. And I was trying to like connect a metaphor of like new life and all these 45-day-old chickens, because that's as long as they get to live, a broiler, and how it was something like that. And she's like, "No, Eli, you're missing it." She was like, what it was one word. And she was like, it was desperation. And so those students at the desk, there was just this kind of fog of desperation, that I could feel from them, from the shifts they were working, how they were, and then there was this desperation that we were feeling, about, are we going to be able to have another kid? And so, yeah, I didn't actually, experience that, in terms of experience the miscarriage. And I've been doing these talks, for 2 or 3 weeks now. And so I get all these questions. I had the best question the other day. A person in the audience asked me, they're like, well, what did you learn from doing this? Because this book was by far the most challenging book. Like, Don't Know Tough is about high school football. Ozark Dogs is just kind of like a gritty Southern thriller, very within my wheelhouse. This book is way outside of my wheelhouse. And so when I turned it into my editor, her name's Juliet Grames. she ended up, she wanted to do a Zoom call, because I think she wanted me to see her face. And she was like, are you sure? Like, are you sure that you want to bite off all this, like in one book? And I said, yeah, I really think I am. I mean, you've got a draft of it. And she said, okay. She's like, I see what you've got. It's going to take work, and it's going to be a challenge for you to get all these different things right. She said, but if you can meet that challenge with love, then I think you can do it. And so it ended up taking us about 6 more drafts. So as an author, at least in my book, every time I send that book to my editor, I think it's done. I think that's it. And I'm so thankful for Juliet for literally continuing to push me on all fronts to make sure that I met both of those challenges with love. She would literally, like in the note sections of the manuscript, she would write, dude, you sounded so much like a dude, because you're trying to write across the gender gap. And then I was so pleased, as it's come out, and now I'm in a place where 2.5, almost 3 weeks now of it being out. So I've been at these, and people have read it, and I've been braced because I think, you can take a swing, and you can take a challenge, and you can take a risk as an author. You just got to get it right, and y'all will be the ones, the audience is the one to see, if you get it right. But back to that question of the person asking me, what did I learn? And I think, so I know this from being a teacher, that books, what they do, this magic that happens when you take black marks on a white page, and what we get as a reader is you get to live inside someone's head who isn't from where you're from, doesn't look like you, is lived a totally different experience. And in our world right now, like, we need that more than anything. And as a person who's been in a high school classroom, watching, how students maybe don't want to read, nearly as much, it's so important. And so when you can, it's more powerful than watching like moving pictures on a screen. You're really in the character's head when you're reading them. But as a writer, as someone who has to dream these people up and then bring them to life and make them move, whatever you learn as a reader, as a writer, I feel that I learned tenfold. And so to answer that lady's question who asked me that, what did I learn by writing this? I learned a whole bunch. I learned a lot about my state. I write about Arkansas. I love Arkansas. I've lived other places. We're not going anywhere. We live in Arkansas now, but that doesn't mean that there are not things within my state that I would like to see done better. I learned a whole bunch about my wife, who is basically any mom. If you look at the book, if we're talking outside in, the book is dedicated for mom and every other mom out there, for the 2 we lost between Emmy and Finn, and for my first block students who couldn't stay awake. Now I know why. So when I was writing this, my wife has always been my first reader. My wife, she was a pole vaulter at the University of Arkansas, so she's like more of a jock, than I. She's full jock. Like, she was not a reader, she was. And so she has this way of she doesn't read and like offer critique or like, I think this could be better. It's almost, you get the thumb, And so I would give her this book in pieces because so much of it was so personal and I was digging so deep. And she kept getting, the thumbs up, and it kept getting, and then when I got the thumbs down or even sideways, what ended up happening was almost this form of therapy that was even more powerful than therapy, because we have this nice metaphor, you know, in front of us. So I learned so much about her, and I learned so much about motherhood, you know, and I ended up finally sitting down to write the book when our son was 6 months old. And so I made the Raising Arizona allusion earlier. But so the book was written, the first draft was written in that fog of new parenthood, you know, in that world of sleepless nights and all that stuff. And I think it plays through. I think you can feel it. I think, again, that desperation works on both sides of our four characters. So anyway, I think that's about all I got to say about Broiler. And if y'all have questions, fire away. Not everybody all at once. Yes.
Did you find that was a great departure for you from your earlier book?
So yeah, he asked, did I find that this was a great departure? Arkansas was the thing that tied it together, like the fact that it was still an Arkansas book. It is set in Springdale. So Northwest Arkansas is where Tyson is located, J.B. Hunt is located, Walmart is located, and it's a completely different world, especially even now, than like when I was in high school or any of that time. So moving the book up there was kind of fun, because it's a whole different thing than the rest of the state. But yeah, I felt like it was, and I was excited to do that. I felt like maybe I could have stayed in the Don't Know Tough Ozark Dogs lane of like gritty, grit lit crime, whatever, Southern noir, whatever people call it, and just kept doing that, rechurning it over and over again. One thing I've said though, and I've said this at other places too, and I believe it, I really don't think, in a lot of ways, that a writer, a novelist gets to choose their stories. In a lot of ways, I feel like the stories choose us. And here's what I mean by that. Ideas are a dime a dozen. I get ideas, I keep them in notes on my phone. I used to have in my office, it was all unfinished wall. I'd write them on the wall, doing my best, you know, Roanoke impersonation. And all of those ideas are still there. It's the ones that won't let go, the ones that you keep thinking about, that kind of choose you. And this whole weird alchemy of chicken plants and motherhood and all this stuff, I couldn't get it. I couldn't shake it. You know, I had to write it. And so, yes, it is a departure from my first two books. It's probably a little slower. You know, it's a little more of a deep burn. I will say, I got to narrate the first two audiobooks for Don't Know Tough and Ozark Dogs, which was a complete labor of love. And I was dead set on doing it, because those books are firmly rooted in this voice that I really knew in Arkansas. And they didn't want me to do it, because they got voice actors, you know, who do all this. So I finally get to do it, and we do it over in Memphis. It takes us like 30 hours to get 8 hours of recorded audio. It was really a long process. But for this book, I wasn't gonna stretch it that far. And I just say that to say that it's narrated by this lady by the name of Victoria Villarreal, who she's about my age, but she grew up in Houston. And she kind of brings that whole, I don't usually go back and read these books, like after I've turned them in the very last time. And I definitely wasn't going to listen to myself ever reading them, you know, because it would have just been torture. I don't wanted to change it. And so it makes these sort of events hard, because you hadn't read the book in about a year. You know, like you go out talking about it and you're already on to the next book. But as I've been driving around, I've been listening to her read this book. And I think exactly to answer your question, it struck me, because with her voice reading it, there were moments where I was like, did you write that, man? Like, did you, you know? And so, yeah, because it felt like such a farther thing, a different thing than what I've done. And I'm proud of that. I'm proud of trying to kind of challenge and stretch it. Yes?
So I know you said that writing this book was a challenge, and you had to push yourself out of your comfort zone writing about motherhood and on unfamiliar topics like chicken processing. So like, do you feel that now that you have this done for your next one, you can push yourself further, and like you'll probably still write about Arkansas, but like go out of the bounds to write something even crazier or even more unfamiliar to you?
Yeah, well, the next one's actually set in Mississippi. But the protagonist is from Arkansas. It's called Mississippi Blue 42, and we just turned it in, and it takes a hard look at big money college football and how, so that's where the Blue 42, Mississippi Blue 42. So yeah, so Arkansas, there is a rookie FBI agent, and she is first in her class. Her name's Ray Johnson. She's, and then she has her eyes set on counterterrorism and all this task force stuff. And then she gets stuck on what she sees as like white-collar crime fraud investigation at a big college football program in Mississippi. And she's pissed, because she's like, why in the hell am I doing this? And it takes her about 24 hours to realize, that counterterrorism don't have nothing on what's going down. So I say that to say that it is a completely different. I'm a huge fan. I said I wrote these 3 books back before my first one ever came out in 2022. The one thing that I have been working on since then has been this book. And the tone, I'm a huge Elmore Leonard fan, maybe a little Carl Hyacin mixed in. So it has, when you take on that world, it has this kind of dark humor, where it's almost like a Coen Brothers movie or something, which is completely new for me. So yeah, right when I've switched everybody up into, something like this, I'm going to try a different thing there. So.
What towns is set in Mississippi?
Compson, Mississippi, a fictional Mississippi. Yeah.
North Mississippi?
A little bit south of where you think.
Okay.
Fictional university, too. What's up, Hudson?
Hey, sorry.
I was just going to ask, despite everything that you know now, do you still eat chicken?
I got asked the same question on one of these, and I had literally just eaten a fried chicken sandwich. So yeah, I do. And it leads me to talk about this one point that I want to talk about. The point of the book is not to convince anybody to be a vegetarian or a vegan. And if you are, then I absolutely am so proud of you and proud of doing that. I'm all for it. Here's the point. Even the way that we do, like, vegetarian and vegan stuff when it comes to farming, like, there are ways that ends up hurting things, too. Because it's so much about the money, And so, like, when I talk about this book, Luke Jackson, who I read you the character, they're upper middle class. Like, he's actually from this town called Arkadelphia, which is where I went to college. And dude should have everything he needs to be happy. Okay? Like, he's got all the money he needs to be happy. He's not a 1%er. But his sin in this book is that he wants more. He wants a little more. And that's kind of what drives us to the inflection point that we have. So my point in this book is that, like, it's not that you should eat or not eat. It's just like there's a way to do this right. There's a way to do this right. And so that's kind of the point I'm going at. So, yeah.
I'm curious, you talked about writing across the gender divide, and I think based on the surnames of your characters, that means you're probably already also writing across a divide and trying to figure out the interior lives of Mexican-American people in Arkansas.
Yeah.
Talk about that kind of research and how you approach that, how you learn.
John, it started when I became a head football coach at the age of 26 at a 5A school in Arkansas, which goes up to like 7A. And the town that I was in had a big chicken plant. And long story short, I lasted 2 seasons. I had no idea I got the job more for my playing career. And little did I know the job was like being the mayor, the sheriff, and a youth pastor all tied in, to one gig. And it just about killed me. It's really the reason I'm here now, because I would have probably still been coaching. We went 1-19 in those 2 seasons. But and had I not lost all those games, I probably would have kept coaching. But I got out and thought, damn, I got to do something else. So I'm going to start writing books. And I'm so glad I did. I say all that to say that chicken plant was bringing in not only El Salvador, Mexico. We had Marshallese, Karen. I mean, they were on our football team. And they had these crazy names. One was Sir Nathan, one was Blue 2, and I think these names were just like they were giving them, like they were getting to pick their name and picking it. So I say all that to say, a lot of this for me started with that experience, and then those conversations that I had there. I was around them at least enough to give me the nugget of like, this is what those lives look like. This is what that, and then the rest, God, who said this? Henry James. Henry James said, an author is someone who endeavors to be someone upon whom nothing is lost. And so what I've always took that to mean is like, if you're listening, if you're watching, if because it's all around me where I am. Are you really paying attention to these students? Are you really listening to? So I mean, there's no better education than being a teacher if you're really locked in. You know what they are. From there, I've been lucky as the book we were getting it all cleaned up and going. There's so much good stuff out there right now on the chicken process. I mean, in the last 2 years, it's been like a boom. Alice Driver is an Arkansas author who's got a book coming out in the fall called The Death of the American Worker. And it is a deep dive into Tyson and a deep dive into this sort of stuff. And so, yeah, man, I mean, I think that's it. And then I think there's a part of it that's just like, you got to write. Like, you got to dream it, and you got to imagine it, and you got to get in it. And then you either get it right, you do it well, or you don't. And that's when it doesn't work.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
When you were researching this, did you anticipate any pushback from corporate poultry?
Well, I already told you, like how I am in the whole sports world. And so I do this thing for there's a radio station called 103.7 The Buzz. And for some reason, I guess because of my football stuff and the book stuff, they bring me on every Tuesday to recommend a book, which has been the most painful thing in the world. Because these suckers, I even do, like Phil Jackson books or like Sports Center, The Natural. And it never works. But it keeps me locked into the sports world too. And what was it? Like 2 or 3 months ago, Arkansas was getting a new basketball coach. And we get Coach Cal from Kentucky, Coach Cal Perry. And does anybody know how we got Coach Cal at Arkansas?
Tyson money.
$50 million money from Mr. Tyson. So here I am doing my call, and all these guys are calling radio show, and they're like, man, tell Mr. Tyson. And I'm thinking, damn, this is the worst time in the world to be doing, a book about chicken stuff. But no, man, I haven't. Every book I've ever written has scared me a little bit. My first book was I coached high school football for 5 years. There was all sorts of that world that was in that book. My second book was loosely inspired by a true crime that happened in our hometown. We've had 4 homicides in like the last 50 years, and 2 of them happened on this one night that that book is set, Ozark Dogs. So that scared me, living in a small town. And then this one hurt, just scared me because of all that, and for all the other things I mentioned, But the big Tyson stuff, I don't know. This is my go. I say because I've never had any. After all that, there hasn't really been anything. The only thing I think is maybe the people that it would upset they probably ain't reading many books, So. Anybody else? All right. Well, thank y'all so much.